Welcome, Carm Capriato, the Service Aftermarkets podcast pioneer with the gold standard of aftermarket business podcasts. Join me for Aftermarket Insights as we advance the aftermarket. And as always, know that you'll learn just one thing. Find us on your favorite podcast listening app and remarkableresults.biz or on my YouTube channel. Hey, everybody, welcome. We're back at MAX 2025, the 45th year of doing this at the Mobile Air Climate Systems Conference. We're in late January, early February here. Thanks to NASTAF, the National Automotive Service Task Force, for having us here. And lots of good stuff going on. I got a great interview for you about finding leaks in your refrigerant. Can't wait. Hey, I also want to thank Honeywell and Cora for having us here at the 45th Annual MAX Conference here in Orlando. Great people, and we appreciate them sponsoring us to be here. You know, Napa Trax will move your shop into the SMS fast lane with on-site training and 6 days a week support. Did you hear that? And local representation. Find Napa Trax on the web at napatracs.com. And are you ready to optimize training with today's class in just 5 minutes daily? Boost knowledge, retention, and improve team performance. Start seeing results today. Join your peers at today'sclass.com. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and thanks. Hey, welcome back. Boy, lots going on here. We've done a lot of great interviews. And oh, by the way, we've snuck in and seen some of the incredible training. 35 different trainers, right, Tracy, I think? And about 70 hours of training scheduled here. Some phenomenal stuff. So we snuck inside of this great class on leak detection. Matt Farel from Inficon was in front of the class, and you were on fire. We're watching what you were doing.
Well, I'm a sales guy. I love being up there and talking all the time.
Oh, my God, you did say that in the class.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did say, hey, I'm a sales guy, so beware. That was really good. And John Godden is here. Spectronics Corp. Tracer Products, right?
Yeah, Tracer Products, the automotive division of Spectronics Corporation.
You're the die guy, and you're the electronic finder guy, right?
The sniffer guy.
The sniffer guy. Well, I didn't want to say that, but thank you for breaking the ice on that. Look, as I've been chatting and doing some of these interviews and seeing the cost of all this stuff and where thermal management is going someday, your products are like key to the start to figure out what's wrong with the vehicle.
It is. And air conditioning is just becoming more and more important. It's more of a thermal management issue than it is air conditioning these days, because those air conditioning systems or thermal management systems are now starting to be tied into EV battery thermal management, keeping the battery at the proper optimal temperature. So it's really moving from let's say a convenience air conditioning into a safety system. So maintaining it, keeping it running properly, keeping it leak-free becomes more and more important these days.
Your device is going to work exactly the same on a heat pump system as it would a regular air system?
Yeah, a heat pump system is the same as a regular air system. It's circulating refrigerant. It's utilizing most of the same refrigerants. So it's going to work exactly the same.
I want to learn so much about heat pumps. And so Tracy and I walked into Michael Invart's class yesterday on heat pumps. It was packed. It was packed. And we came in halfway through. And everybody knows I'm not a super tech guy, and I was kind of lost in a few of his slides. But apparently, heat pumps is nothing, it's not as complicated as they say, because you got to learn a different way to do things.
Well, you're going to find, heat pumps are very common in residential. All that you're doing is sort of running your air conditioning in reverse. I mean, that's really kind of the layman's terms of it.
Right.
So instead of dumping cool, you're dumping heat. And you can switch on and off. So depending on the direction of the system, and again, I'm oversimplifying, depending on the direction of the system, you're going to be able to generate either heat or cold. And that's where we're talking about thermal management. You're moving heat or cold around the system.
So it's either an electronic device or a die.
Yes.
Are dyes just as big and important as in a diagnostics for an air problem?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, I would say, ELDs, of course, offer one option as a service tool for these sort of things, but we see dye complementing that technology, whereas a bit different. This is an additive versus your so-called sniffers, kind of are more of a typical what you would expect or call a service tool. But yeah, they act in kind of very similar fashions. And at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find leaks and prevent leakage of refrigerants into the environment.
When I was having our pre-call with you, John, you had said something about assembly line OEMs and something that's going on that may make it easy down the road.
Yes. So yeah, on the die side of things, we do work with some OEs basically at the factory or at a component level when they're producing the vehicles. And in the desiccant bags that go in the AC systems, we'll put, we call it a tracer wafer, little pellet that we'll put in there. And right off the assembly line, not only is there some leak detection going on to take a look before potentially the vehicle leaves the factory, but then of course after that, there's going to be ongoing leak detection in the system for the lifetime of the compressor oil.
So basically you get a die in the system or you have a tracer wafer, which I think is the coolest name, tracer wafer. Are you kidding me? It sounds like something Hollywood came up with, doesn't it? You put the die in, you look for, it's tough though under the dash to find if you have a problem, which is where the electronic finder comes in.
Well, the dies and the electronic leak detection really complement each other. Finding leaks is tough. Anybody listening to this podcast will tell you it can be maddening trying to find a leak in the system. One of the great things about dies is it's very visual. You can see the leak with the UV light. But if the leak is hidden from, say, line of sight, if it's in the dash, if it's behind something, you may not have that visual view. But that's where an electronic leak detector can it's sniffing, it's pulling air, it's creating airflow. You may not be right on top of the leak if it's on the backside of a component, but if there's refrigerant present, a lot of times that electronic leak detector will sense it and sort of lead you to where that leak is. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a hint. Okay, where is it within this loop? And how fast can I get there? When John and I talk about this, we always talk about pros and cons of each of the system. Actually being able to see the leak is very satisfying. And that visual confirmation is great. You don't always get that. With electronic leak detection, you have to trust in your tool. You have to understand that it's very sensitive. You need to know how to use it. It's a little more complicated than dies.
Let me stop you for a minute.
Sure.
Say, for example, I knew I had a leak. I've sniffed, if you will, underneath the hood. And I said, better go inside. So I sit, whatever settings you set on that unit, and you sit in that driver or passenger seat, and all of a sudden it goes off. It does what it has to do.
Right.
You still don't know where the hell it is, but there's something in the vehicle that's telling me I found something.
Right. If you're sensing refrigerant in the passenger cabin, and refrigerant's heavy, it sort of spills. So if you sense it in the floorboards, if you're catching a pool of refrigerant, it's good to know that your leak is there, maybe behind the dash, before you go through the expense of tearing that dash apart. But once you get the dash apart, you may see it with your UV light. Okay, there it is. But before you went to the major expense of taking all that apart, you've gotten some indication as to where that leak might be.
I know my example was kind of weird, but is refrigerant bad for us humans?
I would say it's not great for us. It displaces oxygen like a lot of things. So you don't want to be in an incredibly refrigerant-rich environment. But you're not going to find that in automotive.
We're not going to find that. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be in more.
All right.
That'll be more in the big supermarket type mechanical rooms where they may have 4,000 pounds of refrigerant running through a system, as opposed to a vehicle that may have 1 to 2 pounds.
Let's go back to dyes. Is the light important? Getting the right light to blend with the dye?
Yeah, that's a great question, and 100% yes. Especially, coming from my point of view as a die manufacturer, we design our lights and our dies together to provide optimal performance, and that's something that we went through a little bit yesterday in the training session to really show that as a system. I think the die typically tends to get a lot of credit, and people may say, I have a UV light, laying around, let me just use this one. Whereas on the tracer side of things, these are kind of designed in parallel, or if we have an existing die, we're going to go ahead and create a lamp that provides the most optimal performance of the die, as well as user experience, depending if you're looking at a more broad range or if you want to narrow down with a higher intensity into an area that you might have picked up as being the troublesome location. And just to point a little bit to what Matt said, we do acknowledge, each other's technology. We're kind of the overall effort of leak detection as a whole So just another example, say you did find a general location, with a sniffer or something, and then you want to start using a light. There's a couple different ways that you can go about it.
So in tandem is what you're telling me.
Correct.
That good thermal managers will probably sit the light and the dye and the sniffer right here and saying, okay, what's my gun of choice?
Right. It's, again, the technologies really complement each other. Finding leaks is tough. And you may, because a lot of these vehicles come preloaded with dye, the first thing you may do is pull out that UV light just to check to see. Sometimes finding leaks is very easy. You pull out the light, there's your leak. There's dye all over some hose that's split, and you're good to go. Well, if you don't get something on that first pass, you've had a problem. Maybe the electronic leak detector is your next choice that you would go to start to go a little deeper, dig a little deeper to find that.
And I imagine if you found a leak right out of the chute with your light and you say, need a new hose or a new adapter or something, and you don't look at the entire system, you could end up doing all that work and have a second leak.
And that's a good point. Yeah. We're kind of always talking about finding a leak or potentially a lot of times the leak, but it's not always going to be
It's not the leak. It's them leaks.
Correct. And it can be many, and we've seen that. And of course, you can have various sizes as well. So that's always something that's really important. And I know Matt always brings this up a lot, is that not only is it important to detect and find leaks, of course, and then repair them, but before you send the vehicle on its way, you send the customer home, you really want to verify that what you found was the extent of the leakage in the system.
Or if you've exchanged a component, let's say you've put a new compressor on, basically you've had to create some new joints, and you need to validate that you've got a tight seal on all those joints that you put in place. So it may not have come in with a leak, but you don't want to send it out with a leak if you've done some work on the system.
And so better to use the electronic versus the dye at that moment in time? Just sniff around the new component?
Well, one of the things about dyes is you have to give it some time to circulate through the system. So it needs to circulate, have some time to work through the system so that it can work its way through the leak. The electronic leak detector is a little more immediate. You can use it right away. If you've done a repair, as soon as you start up the car, you're leak detecting. If you have to add dye, add new oil, you sometimes need to give it some time. John can probably speak more to that than.
Yeah, no, exactly, agreed. And that's kind of where it comes down to more of a preference, or if what the time factor happens to be.
What do you hear? What's the preference out there? I mean, give me an idea. Is it 60, 40, 40? I mean, what do you see from the real thermal management guys out there?
Well, let me throw it out there that dyes is the predominant leak detection method in the market. Tracer's been doing it a long time. They do a good job. It's preloaded in the system. Most of you called them, technicians, you called them thermal managers. I think that's a great term.
The thermal manager specialist.
I picked
The
up on
thermal
that as well.
manager
That's great.
specialist.
Yes.
I think you've coined a new term there.
Well, no, trust me, we can get into that later.
I would trademark that fast.
No, trust me, there's a million language shifts that I'm working on. But go ahead. Thank you for bringing it up.
That was great.
But let me throw it back over to John. It's because dyes have been in the marketplace for so long. Electronic leak detectors are evolving. They've gotten a lot better than they were 20 years ago. Dyes have been solid for a long time. So that's why you really find it being used out in the market a whole lot.
Yeah, and to kind of further Matt's point, there's also a difference if you take a look at OE or in warranty versus aftermarket solutions as well, right? So as Matt was mentioning, dye is typically installed at the factory, so that's a big reason why you may see it as a more predominant, means of leak detection. But I would say once you get into the aftermarket, that's when it really, if it's at a shop, or if it's at a dealer. Of course, we have some dealer program stuff, but I think at that point is when it kind of becomes more of not only preference in general, but in that specific case, if you have both the tools in the toolbox, which one is going to get you to find that leak.
Are you in sales?
I'm not.
Matt,
Yes.
he should be in sales.
All these applications guys do so well out in the field. I mean, they really do. I mean, they know their stuff. They only speak the truth. That's what engineers do. Us salespeople, you gotta keep an eye on us.
Well, that was a mouthful, by the way. We can go a million places with that one. So tell me the difference. If, say, for example, I have a vehicle with an R134A, or in the next bay, I got to work on a 1234YF.
Is there a different methodology in looking for a leak based on two different ways to find it, depending on the refrigerant?
You know, with 134A and 1234YF, the chemical compounds are so similar that with electronic leak detection, normally electronic leak detection will work on both types of systems.
Okay.
That's what we're seeing. We're not seeing, for instance, in Europe, you're starting to see some CO2 systems. People are talking about propane. Things are going to change in the coming decades. Nothing's going to happen right away. But from our standpoint, the leak detector will work on both gases.
I'll say the same goes for dye as well. When you bring up 134A and 1234YF, Tracer Products, we do have dyes that are technically designed. We do have dyes that are technically designed for each, both 134A and 1234YF. We also have dyes that we market as being universal for either system. Doesn't really change the design of our dye itself, but what we do is we design our dyes around the base oil or the compressor oil that's going to be used for the system. Common ones like POEs and PAGs, and in the world of 1234YF, they might have some additivized PAG, something a little bit more special. But the key for us as being an actual system additive is we're always designing around and ensuring we're compatible with the actual host fluid, namely the oil that the compressor comes charged with.
Hey, let's face it, your shop management system is the single most important tool in your shop, period. Napa Trax has made selecting the right shop management system easy by offering the industry's best, most comprehensive SMS. Now, it all starts when a local representative meets with you to learn about your business and how you need to run it. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice, and having local representation is a huge plus. Customizing Trax to your business, whether you're a one-person shop or a large multi-bay or multi-location company, a representative consults with you to help optimize your shop's workflow, efficiency, and profitability. Trax always has the flexibility to do business how you need to do it, which means it can also grow as your business grows. And unlike the other guys, we'll be there for you after installation with the best training and support in the business. Yes, a learning management system tailored to each role in your company. Simply put, Trax was designed and built for shop owners just like you. Visit us on the web at NapaTrax, that's NapaTracs.com. Transform your team with today's class, where automotive training is easy, quick, and fun. Just 5 minutes a day on our app can eliminate hours of looking up forgotten information later. It's perfect for technicians, advisors, and managers alike. Keep critical knowledge fresh and top of mind, ensuring your team operates at peak efficiency. Today's class is impactful, accessible from anywhere, and a bit of fun too, and we're not talking about after-hours pizza either. For training that gets results, turn to todaysclass.com.
You just can't be a slingshotter kind of specialist when you attack a system. You got to know what you're doing when it comes to dyes.
That's correct.
Tell me about the class yesterday. How long was it?
It ran for an hour and a half.
Okay.
And we split time fairly evenly.
Was it enough time? Too much time? I mean, what do you have to cover in an hour and a half? Give me a high-level synopsis.
With any training, it goes a lot faster than you think it will. Hour and a half seemed to be just right.
Perfect.
For what we needed. It went really well. We covered what we needed to. I think that it's always good to have an opportunity to do some hands-on, which when you're standing up in front of the crowd, it's a little hard to get that. But the training went really well. We were really pleased with it.
You covered the dyes, you covered the electronic. What kind of questions were you getting from the class?
Well, one of the things we went into was the use of forming gas in some leak detecting, which is if you have an empty system, you can put some sort of tracer gas into the system, say a 95 nitrogen, 5 hydrogen, rather than putting refrigerant into the system. And then you can use a leak detector looking for the hydrogen.
How often does that happen, that something comes in there empty?
A vehicle comes in empty, there's been an event and everything spilled out. That's fairly common.
So
in the real world.
a smart thermal management specialist would say, we have an opportunity to try a different gas.
Right. Rather than putting an expensive refrigerant that may be harmful to the environment, only to see it leak out
Come
of the
out
system.
again.
Yeah.
And in the case of dyes, you just don't go there. And that's why it would be more preferred to use a leak detector.
Right. In that case, I mean, if you don't have anything in the system, dye relies on the ability to recycle, to run things through the system.
Yeah.
Now, if the system's empty, there may be traces of a dye where everything exited the system. So there may be an indication of where that leak is. But if you're just doing straight leak detection and you know you've got a leak, rather than put expensive refrigerant in and chasing that leak, you can go through some sort of tracer gas type leak detection. So there was some good conversation on using that, especially in heavy duty out in the field, people that work on large earth movers that don't come into the shop where you have to go to them. That was one of the topics that came up at the meeting that was kind of beyond the normal.
Same with you?
Similar. I mean, the only thing that I would say is different, and we did get a good question on, and I brought this up earlier, but the main difference with the dye, right, is we're actually adding it to the system, whereas the ELDs or the sniffers, you're working from the outside. So something we always have to be cognizant of is, as I mentioned before, we kind of design around the refrigerant, we design around the oil that the compressors are charged with, but what's one of the new big ones that everyone's talking about nowadays, right, is the EVs. And with the introduction of EVs, and it was already seen with hybrids, some early hybrids had belt-driven compressors, then they kind of went more to these electric compressors, similar to that of an EV. Voltages got higher, and what really the ultimate outcome of that is that any additive has to have great dielectric properties when you're adding to one of these EV AC systems.
Wow.
Yeah, more to consider with EVs and dyes.
Can you use the ELD? I got to get this completely right. The electronic leak detector, ELD, on a hybrid or an EV battery?
Not so much on the battery, but on the thermal
Components.
management
Yeah,
system.
yeah.
Anything, if you're looking for refrigerant, anything that's in that refrigerant loop
In the refrigerant loop.
is what you're looking for.
So I would say that's the kind of biggest difference between our products and that of Matt's, Inficon's products, is that for them, they're just trying to detect the refrigerant. Since we're now in the system, we have to sort of conform to the characteristics that have been provided by the manufacturer. And to ensure that the actual systems as a whole with these electric compressors don't become conductive or live, you have to have anything that's added has to either, maintain the insulative properties that the system was designed with, or just make sure that you don't increase the conductivity of the system for not only performance reasons, but for safety reasons for, anybody, for any thermal managers that may be working on the vehicle.
That was a mouthful.
He used some big engineering words.
Yes, you did. Whoa. I think you left me somewhere about a minute and a half ago. All I could think about in the back of my head was we come out with new products. You come out with new ELDs. You come out with new dyes and new lights. I mean, is there somebody having a disco lights in a lab somewhere, seeing what they can energize dye with? I'm only joking, but I mean, there's got to be innovation is critical today. Tell us about how you guys do that. Go ahead. We'll start with you first, Matt.
Well, these sensor technologies continue to evolve over the years. It's gone from simple chemical reaction sensors that's reacting to refrigerants, reacting mainly to the fluorine in the refrigerants.
Are you sure you're not an engineer?
Yeah, I'm not an engineer.
Okay.
I can say just enough to make me sound like I know what I'm talking about. The more advanced leak detectors are now using infrared sensor technology, which actually involves sort of a beam of light going down a tube, and the refrigerant will absorb certain wavelengths of light in the infrared spectrum. So, yeah, we won't go deep. I won't go deep
That's
into
way
it.
beyond my pay
Right,
grade.
but what you do is you end up with a sensor or a leak detector that is not going to give you a lot of false positives in leaks. There's not a lot of cross-contaminants with other chemicals under the hood, and it's a longer life sensor, more accurate.
Is it a double check?
A double check?
Yeah, I mean, I sense some refrigerant, and then does this infrared thing try to prove that it is or it isn't?
Well, the infrared is what's sensing the refrigerant.
Okay.
Yeah. So the sensor is sensing the refrigerant. It's just a more selective, accurate sensor technology.
So it would be a new unit that a new ELD that you come out that is all about infrared.
Right. The higher end, newer technology is infrared sensors.
Where do these brainiacs come up with this?
I don't know.
Isn't it amazing?
It is.
Who would have thought? This is Star Wars stuff, huh?
It's really improved, again, over the last 10 years. If somebody was using a leak detector, say 20, 25 years ago, that was when they were just starting out. Yeah. So things have really evolved over time, and they're much more accurate than they were.
New products for the dye industry. what's going on there?
Yeah, and looking down the road.
Things that you can tell us.
Yeah, of course. And I would say one of the big ones that we just, worked through in the past couple of years was having these sort of dies that were particularly meant for electric vehicle applications due to that, increasing or the presence of the new hurdles with the electrical properties. We had to make sure that we had a die or a product that was very specific to this application, ensuring the safety of the system and any technicians working on it. But I would say the next thing is, all this talk for new refrigerants or use of natural refrigerants in the industry.
We've heard some stuff about 444. We've heard some stuff about moving 134 into 1234YF. We've heard all that. You guys you're there to meet the challenge, right? Currently, today.
Yeah.
Whatever,
Very much, yeah.
Whatever happens, right?
The big move right now is talk about moving to R290, which is actually propane.
I heard that.
Yeah, so what you'll find, and people are surprised to hear that propane is a great refrigerant. It's used primarily now in appliances. If you check your refrigerator, you'll probably find if you've got a newer refrigerator, it's using propane. Smaller charges, so you're not dealing with flammability issues. Let's say 50 grams, about a tenth of a pound of refrigerant. You'll find small window units may use R290, reach-in coolers in supermarkets, R290. Now they're starting to talk about doing it in automotive. So
scary. I heat with propane.
Right.
At my house.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to think that you're going to use the same thing that you heat your house with as a refrigerant,
yeah,
it's hard for people to wrap their head around.
You know what? I'm not astounded by anything today because there's guys like John out there just trying to figure the world out.
Yeah, and I mean, you have to, right? I mean, the world's getting more complicated, and we have to kind of take the ride along with it.
When your company hears this podcast, they're going to put you in sales. I know it. That's what's going to happen. So let's just wrap this up. I'd love people to know how they could get a hold of your company, Mac. Give us a website.
Inficon.com or InficonServiceTools.com is a great way to look us up to get some dealer locator information. You'll find us out on the web, and a whole lot of tool distributors will have us as well.
Tool Truck's got your stuff on it, right?
Yeah, they do. And I will say, this is not really just an Inficon pitch. There are a lot of good leak detectors that are out on the market. And I would say if you look for an SAE certified leak detector, you're going to find one that's proven to do what you need it to do.
That's it.
So
cool. How do we get a hold of you, John, or your company?
Yeah,
Tracer.
So that's going to be through tracerproducts.com. Give you a good idea of our offering, product suites, and then also, where to find any local distribution.
Cool. Hey, this was fun. It was kind of a tight, short episode, but I think we put a lot of great information, or maybe confirmed or denied some of the thoughts that people have had on why leak detection is so important and where LED or ELDs, I said LED, I was going to say LEDs, isn't that funny? LED, leak electronic detector. Oh, it would still work.
Yeah,
It still works. All right. Electronic leak detectors and or dies. So thank you both, Matt Farel and John Godden. Thanks for being here, guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us.